Today's video is part 2 of our Woodworking Terminology Absolute Basics series. And like the first video, if you hover over the timeline below, you can see that this video is broken up into 5 major sections. Power tools, types of cuts, types of trim and molding, window parts, and cabinet parts. Power tools are any tool that require an electrical power source or any other type of mechanism to make it operate. So with that, here are the list of most common power tools and their associated terms. A table saw is used to rip and cross-cut material easily, accurately, and safely. It is by far the most used power tool in the shop. Ripping is cutting a board along its length or with the grain, which changes the board's overall width. Cross-cutting is cutting across the width or across the grain, which changes the board's overall length. The table saw is a great tool to talk about 2 other terms, and that is in-feed and out-feed. The in-feed side of the table saw is this area before the blade, while the out-feed side is this area beyond the blade. These terms also apply to the next 2 power tools as well. The first one being the planer, which is used to reduce the overall thickness of the material, and then the other is the jointer, which is used to square the edges. The table saw, the jointer, and the planer are the 3 main big power tools that you need to be able to dress rough lumber. And now you can begin to see why most people buy S4S lumber, because not a lot of people do have the money or the space for these big power tools. The miter saw is next. This tool is specifically designed to make crosscuts and to make miter and bevel cuts. More on that in the next section. The jigsaw is a tool that is great for making curved cuts and notches. The circular saw is the carpenter's #1 power tool used to cut dimensional lumber, plywood, and other materials. And with the proper accessories, circular saws can produce a cut almost as good as a table saw. Next is orbital sanders. They are a powerhouse when it comes to quickly sanding material down. The router. These power tools are made for putting different profiles on the edges of stock, as well as a lengthy list of other cool stuff. Cordless drills are battery-operated drills that are used for driving screws, as well as turning drill bits to pre-drill holes. Pre-drilling is when you drill a hole prior to installing a screw or a nail to reduce the chances of breaking it off or stripping it out. The last group of power tools worth mentioning is pneumatic nailers. These tools are air-powered tools that quickly and easily install finish nails, brads, framing nails, and much more. As a side note, these nailers nowadays also come in battery-operated and gas versions as well. The most basic cut is a 90-degree crosscut. This cut is used to size boards down to length, and when 2 90-degree cuts come together, they form a butt joint. The next term is miter. Miter cuts are made across the face of the board at an angle, and when 2 miters come together, it's called a miter joint. Similar to a miter joint, a bevel is an angled cut that is made on the edge of the material, not the face like a miter. The most common example of this is used on baseboards. These types of cuts, when put together, are still called miter joints. The last type of angle cut is a compound cut. Compound miters are done on a compound miter saw. These saws not only miter left or right, but they also tilt or bevel left or right. This type of cut is most commonly used on crown molding, and when this joint comes together, it's called a compound miter joint. Let's finish this section off by talking about dados, grooves, and rabbets. Dados are 3-sided trenches cut across the grain of the wood. These cuts are used for joining other intersecting pieces like a shelf in a cabinet. There's another dado as well, and this one's called a stopped dado. Stopped dados stop somewhere along the cut, creating a stopping point for the intersecting piece to butt up against. Oftentimes these are used to stop shelves from coming past the front of a cabinet. Next is the groove. Similar to a dado, and oftentimes still called dados, a groove is a 3-sided trench cut with the grain. And last but not least, the rabbet cut. A rabbet cut has 2 sides and is always cut along the edge of the material. In general, trim is a straight piece of wood like a 1x4 that has an S4S finish. Molding generally refers to a piece of wood that has a shaped profile on it, like a piece of window or door casing. These two terms often get used interchangeably, so just know that you're going to hear that from time to time. The word trim can be used as a verb as well. Someone might say that they're going to trim out a window. Let's move on to talk about a few different types of trim and molding. Baseboard or base molding is trim or molding that is at the bottom of a wall, which covers the intersection between the floor and the wall. Shoe molding or base shoe is a piece of molding that is normally paired with baseboard to add an additional profile or to cover up any gaps in the floor. Next up is paneling. Paneling can be either solid wood or some type of plywood material used to cover up the entire wall. Or it can be used as decorative paneling, meaning that it only covers up a part of the wall, generally within the first 3 feet. Another term used more often than decorative paneling is wainscoting. And wainscoting is great to learn from because it normally incorporates a few different types of trim and molding. The paneling used to create this wainscoting is a beaded paneling, meaning that it has these beads molded right into the sheet of the paneling. Below we have baseboard in the shoe, which we already looked at. But something we didn't look at is on top, which is the cap. The cap, in this case, finishes off the top of the wainscoting. The cap then meets a horizontal rail or trim piece, and some styles of wainscoting may also have vertical stiles as well. Under the cap can be a quarter round, which is a quarter circle of thin molding, or it may even be a cove molding that looks like this. Moving on, the next type of molding to look at is crown molding. Crown molding is normally larger than most moldings and normally installed at the junction between the wall and the ceiling. Crown molding can be used in other places as well, like the top of cabinets. Another term that you may hear often used around molding or installing molding is the word return. A return continues the molding's profile around a corner or finishes it off back into the wall. As you can see, this is a very clean way to finish off this profile, so you're not seeing the end of the molding itself. Before we dive into the window parts themselves, let's look at a few terms that are used to describe the framing members around the window. The rough sill is the framing member that the window sits on. Normally this is a 2x4 or 2x6 piece of dimensional lumber. Along both sides of the rough window opening are what's called jack studs. These studs form the rough opening as well as support the final piece, which is the header. The header is normally made up of multiple layers of dimensional lumber, and it supports any load or weight that is coming from above the window opening. So now that you know a little bit more about what's going on around the window, let's talk about the window itself. The main two parts of the window are the frame and the sashes. The frame is made up of the window head, jamb, and sill. The window sill is the bottom piece here, which can also extend to the outside as well. The window jamb forms the sides of the window, and the window head is the piece at the top. The window sashes are the operational parts of the window that include the glass. They are held in by the window's frame. Moving on, the stool is the finished trim material that covers and mimics the rough sill. Because some windows don't extend out all the way to the interior surface of the wall, extension jambs are used to extend the jamb and the head of the window to be flush with the interior surface. Before the trim or molding is installed, a reveal is marked out on the inside edge of the extension jambs. A reveal creates an extra visual line and steps the trim or molding in from the edge. Reveals are used everywhere in woodworking and in carpentry, so just know that this is going to be a term that you're going to be seeing come up quite often. After that, the trim or molding is installed on the sides of the window, and then the head casing or the trim at the top is installed next. The last piece of trim is called the apron, and the apron runs under the stool to complete the window trim. Cabinets are broken up into lower cabinets, which are the cabinets that sit on the floor, and upper cabinets which hang off the wall. The carcass refers to the rough cabinet box itself, no matter if it's an upper cabinet or a lower. Part of the carcass includes what is called the toe kick, or the toe kick cutout. This is a cutout that's made to allow the user to be able to stand right up next to the cabinet without jamming their toes into it. The last piece that can be grouped into the carcass is the back panel. This is often a piece of finished plywood that can vary from 1/4 inch to 3/4 of an inch, or 6 millimeters to 19 millimeters. Once the carcass is built, the next piece is the face frame. The face frame covers the raw edges of the plywood and gives the needed material to attach the doors and drawers. The face frame is made up of stiles and rails. Rails run horizontally while the stiles run vertically. These same terms then can apply to the cabinet door construction as well. Inside the stiles and rails of the door sits the door panel, and the panel then can either be flat like this one, or it can be raised like this one here. Well, that does it for this little terminology series. I do plan on doing more in the future, so if you have any ideas you'd like to share with me, just drop me a comment below. Thank you so much for joining me today, and may God bless you and your family on this day. Bye for now.